Hi, just quickly, so I've had people asking about what is mind blindness and what is theory of mind. Um, Essentially, mind blindness is the idea about autistic people that they can't understand what's going on in somebody else's mind. They don't even have the idea that somebody else has a mind. So it's really impossible to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when you have no concept that somebody else even really exists as a real person. Um, this was a very old theory from like the late 1980s, early 1990s, somewhere around the era, I don't remember exactly. And this was followed up by a different theory, the theory of mind, when they realized that mind blindness is more than just the sort of cognitive, the thinking related stuff. It's not just knowing whether someone has a mind, it's knowing whether someone also has feelings and that they might have different feelings, but also things like beliefs, values, that sort of thing. So theory of mind was created afterwards to kind of cover everything that mind blindness did, but also to apply it to more emotional sides of things and to also apply it to beliefs and values. That's where the old Sally Ann experiment came in, where they had a doll called Sally, they had a doll called Anne, they did a little role play for the children who were 5 years old or so in the study, and they said Sally and Anne are playing with a ball. Sally goes out to get a drink and hides the ball inside this box, and Sally comes back into the room. Where does Sally think the ball is? And people who don't have the idea that other people have different beliefs based on their knowledge and their experiences will answer, she thinks it's in the box. Why did they answer that? They say Sally thinks the ball is in the box because they themselves know that the ball is in the box, and they cannot distinguish the difference between what do I know and what does somebody else know based on their experiences. And it requires that level of mental maturity to be able to say, Sally wasn't in the room when the ball was hidden, so Sally has no way of knowing where the ball was hidden. And if there are other potential hiding places, then Sally isn't going to know where to look. So she's not going to know. Yeah, so the Sally Ann experiment was considered to be evidence of differences for autistic people. Not actually, it's supposed to be considered evidence that autistic people don't know at the age of 5, whereas neurotypical people at the age of 5 will know that people have different minds and experiences and knowledge and lives essentially from their own. Short version of where that went is that that theory was then absorbed into another new theory because they realized that theory of mind just wasn't cutting it. The evidence wasn't good enough in favor of theory of mind, and that it seemed like it was not so much a disability as a difference, where they might not be so, how do I, essentially the idea that autistic people have no empathy. They were still running with that ball, but their idea was that they are weak in this area, but they are strong in this area to make up for it. That's essentially the idea of the empathizing systemizing theory that followed. The empathizing systemizing theory I can get into a separate time, but the empathizing component of it, it's just the idea that there are different neurotypes. Some neurotypes are geared for empathizing, some neurotypes are geared for systemizing. So some brains are just better at one skill than the other, and every person favors one of those two skills. That was their argument. Their argument was that autistic people do not favor the empathizing skill. They favor the systemizing skill. It's not that they prefer it. It's that that's what their brain is naturally better developed for. Whereas all neurotypical people are supposed to be really good at the empathizing stuff, and their brain is designed for that. That is the short version. Evidence has been found in favor based on certain ideas, but more recent theories have come to light where they've argued that maybe it's not that autistic people don't have empathy, maybe it's that they understand other autistic people, because neurotypical people understand neurotypical people, and it's when you cross those neurologies, when you have a neurotypical and an autistic person in the room, it's only when they are trying to understand each other that there gets to be problems. And you'll notice, based on the fact that everywhere online is full of people who don't understand autistic people, then it goes both ways. Neither of them understand each other as well as they understand people with the same brain type as them. That's what the more recent theories are, and that what we're seeing in all of this evidence that autistic people don't have empathy is just evidence that autistic people, like neurotypical people, struggle to empathize and to understand somebody who's not like them, which is exactly the same for neurotypical people. Neurotypical people don't understand autistic people that well either. And we've also seen that this is also a class issue too. More recent studies have shown that upper class people and middle class people don't understand the emotional states of lower and working class people, which tells me that it's learned. If it can be classist, which is entirely an environmental thing, it's not biology that determines what class you are, therefore it must be learned, it must be conditioned, it must be taught. Therefore, empathizing is a skill that gets taught differently to different people, and there we go. I can honestly say that the way that I empathize with people has changed over time. I'm an autistic person, and my empathizing skills have changed over time. My approach to empathizing has changed over time because I read Brené Brown's books. Well, I've partly read one of them, but I found it really, really helpful. She talks a lot about shame and empathy, and how the opposite of shame is empathy, whether that's for yourself or for somebody else. And in order to be shame resilient, you must learn how to empathize, and to empathize, you must be able to take your emotions out of the picture and look at the issue from the emotional perspective of somebody else, which is a learned skill, as we've established, and you can learn it, because I've gotten better at it noticeably since reading that book. Obviously that's not evidence, that's anecdotal, but do with that what you will. Long story short, there's not really good evidence, whoops, I'm knocking things over. There's not really good evidence that autistic people have no empathy. There's just not. And it's much more likely that autistic people understand and can read other autistic people, and neurotypical people can read and understand other neurotypical people. And it's when you mix groups together, that's when there comes confusion and miscommunication. For example, I am autistic, like I said, and I went to a society at university, and there was this guy who was doing some weird stuff with his hands, and I knew from that, he's nervous. And we were playing a game, and the fact that he was nervous told me something that helped me in the game. You know, it was his tell, essentially, and it was a very autistic tell, and I could see it because I'm autistic and I get it. Whereas other people just thought he had a weird habit or a tic or something, but I got it, and I was the only autistic in the room. So it just goes to show that maybe there is something to this idea that neurotypicals and autistics, when they mix, that's when the confusion happens, but they can really read their own group just fine. I'm going to stop there. This was repetitive. I apologize. I hope that this makes sense. Enjoy. Bye.